Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
Join me, 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty, on my podcast, My Life of Crime, as I take on true crime investigations like no other. This season, I'm looking into the labyrinth of crime and secrets within families. I'm cutting straight to the evidence and talking to the people directly involved, including investigators and the families of victims. Listen to My Life of Crime with Erin Moriarty wherever you get your podcasts.
A note to listeners, the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
Getting him down in the cage, I had no idea what to expect. This was my first time on death row. This is my first serial killer I ever interviewed. I started with Lawrence Bittaker, one of the most nation's sadistic serial killers. And now he's right there in front of me. And I wasn't even sure he would come down. And I was just a ball of nerves for my first time, of course. So I met with him for the first time. It was 2014. He gave up the locations of Cindy and Andrea in 2018, so about 4 years afterwards. And those were, even though I had sat down and met with him a few times, he was still very challenging. He didn't want to call. He didn't want to correspond through the mail. He was still kind of giving me this pushback. And it was finally in 2018, there was a switch. I had gotten pregnant. I had always wondered if that could have been one of the underlying causes. I saw an immense change in all of the serial offenders.
Is there anything you would say to them, your victims, if they were here?
Oh, God. What could I say? What could make up for it? It's like when they ask me what would I like to say to the families. My God, what could I say? What could I say that would mean anything to them?
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman. Hi, everyone. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast, even if it's one word.
Subscribe to our show on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also subscribe to our website, www.partnersintruecrime.com. Follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram to check out our weekly promos.
There are a lot of people who claim to have relationships with serial killers. They write a book, they do a TV show, and that's the end of it. But very few of these people have put in the time and the work that Laura has.
For the past decade, Laura has been interacting with the serial offenders on San Quentin's death row, as well as other prisons around the country. Interview them, study them, build a relationship with them, so they trust her enough to give her information about missing victims who law enforcement has not been able to locate.
Today we're going to release an audio recording of Lawrence Bittaker in the days before his death to illustrate Laura's methodology.
We want to be very clear about this recording. We are not empathizing with Lawrence Bittaker for the horrific crimes that he committed. Our empathy has always and always will be with the victims and their families.
We do feel that it is important to understand the inner workings of these serial killers as a society to start making changes.
Mass shootings in America are becoming so normalized, it is frightening. The only way to stop mass shootings and serial killings from happening is to understand how someone becomes a killer. Are they born this way? Or does society create them? Is it really nature versus nurture? Or are they just born evil?
Laura's work helps us see inside the mind of these serial killers. There are thousands of missing victims of serial killers still unaccounted for.
These victims deserve to be found, and their families deserve to have the right to put them to rest.
So today we have Laura back on, as we always do, with the Serial Killer Whisperer, because she is the Serial Killer Whisperer. And what's going to be interesting today is that we've been talking about and promoting the fact that we're going to be releasing some of these audio recordings that Laura has done with all these serial killers. And specifically today, we're going to release a pretty powerful recording that she did. And it was kind of a seminal moment towards the end of a lot of the conversations she had, just probably not too long before Bittaker died. It's going to be, I won't tell you what it's about because I want you to hear it. What do you think, Sin?
I think it's really important. We really want people to understand Laura's methodology and what she does and what her work, where her work has taken her from the beginning. When Laura first started this study, I know from talking to her that she didn't realize where this was going to go. So Laura, kind of tell me a little bit about when you first sent out the study, what were you anticipating happening?
I thought I would get, just a couple of offenders, jumping on to help me out. I didn't think it was ever going to explode to the magnitude that it did. Getting so many serial offenders, contact me back saying they want to, participate in the study and would allow me to interview them and actually answer these 75 questions on the questionnaire.
Why do you think that they were willing to talk to you, that they wanted to do it?
No, I'm not going in there, as law enforcement to interrogate them about their crimes, what they have done. It's more of an interview, as Alan Pass said, which is a very, very different thing. You're sitting down with them, and I don't go in there to condemn them. They've already been through trial and sentenced to death. And here they are sitting on death row. I'm going in saying, what happened? Why did this occur? What can we learn from this? What can we take from this? How can we prevent this from happening to others in the future? We have to kind of go into the nucleus of it all.
And we know from our experience with serial killers that they are very manipulative and that they do love to have an audience. Did you feel like you were being manipulated in the beginning?
No, it's funny. Through a lot of my interviews, they didn't want anything public. They were speaking very candidly with me. It was actually like pulling teeth to even get them to go on audio and allow me to bring this stuff to the public.
That's interesting, because when we talked to Gary Ridgway, he was thrilled to have an audience, but he knew we were filming a TV show. So maybe that's the difference, So you're going in there with your study to try to figure out why this happened. Do you think that maybe there was part of them that wanted to understand why they did the things they did?
Oh, yeah, definitely. A lot of them have even said to me, they don't understand some of their own inner workings and their motivations. So, it was kind of like an exploration with both of us, trying to figure out, the underlying causes, how this all transpired from their childhood, their genetic predispositions, the perfect storm that came together that led, horrific crimes that they committed.
So from the study, when you first went to see Bittaker, how were you feeling? I mean, can you remember what it was like that day that you walked into San Quentin to see him?
Yeah, that first day, like right before prior, and then take us through like what you were going through, because you didn't know what to expect.
No,
and you didn't know what he was going to say to you. He was going to he could have shut you down right then and there, and then you would have been.
He could have.
So take us through that day.
Well, there was a lot of pushback when I had wrote to him about doing this study. He didn't want to help me with the study. He didn't want to, participate in anything. He didn't even want to meet with me. And how it works is they actually have to send you a visiting form with their signature, because they have to sign off on you coming to even sit down with them. Bittaker had not sent me one. So I had networked through the prison and obtained a visiting form with his signature on it and flew 3,000 miles and, pretty much just said a Hail Mary when I got there that he would come down, and he did. And lucky. But even so, getting him down in the cage, I had no idea what to expect. This was my first time on death row. This is my first serial killer I ever interviewed. I started with Lawrence Bittaker, one of the most nation's sadistic serial killers. And now he's right there in front of me. And I wasn't even sure he would come down. And I was just a ball of nerves for my first time, of course. And I really just had to figure out, how to get through to him, how to connect with him. And that's not an easy task when you have a serial killer in front of you. How do you find commonalities? How do you build that trust and rapport? And you have a very short amount of time to do so.
So what was his response to you during that first meeting?
He was very, very standoffish. When we first got in, he was timid and shy, like he wouldn't look me in the eye. I had looked over some of the letters he had wrote to me and noticed that he had said the word mad, M-A-D, but he had used it not in the context that we use it, like I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm pissed off. The way he used it reminded me of from Alice in Wonderland, like the Mad Hatter, like he's bonkers, he's mad. And for some reason, I picked up on Alice in Wonderland from the way he was using that word. So I had started talking to him about Alice in Wonderland, and it turned out it was one of his favorite childhood books. And I had figured that out just by looking at his word choice through his letters.
Because that's what you do. You analyze the information
Right.
that you're getting from them in order to decipher it in a way that you can understand what they're trying to tell you.
And it's imperative you do so. I mean, that's what helped break me into him was, paying attention to that word choice. And once he was in front of me in that cage, picking up on that word choice and those little subtle cues and the subconscious movements that he might be making, I mean, it makes the world a difference of breaking into them, getting through that wall, that barrier they have up.
What kind of subconscious movements was he making during your interview? First interview?
He made one, and it was really baffling. And I had actually talked to Alan Pass about what it could be. He would talk, and then he would almost like gag, but throw his tongue out of his mouth. And he had done it so often, and it was always just so weird. And I had told Alan about it. I was like, "What do you make of it?" And he had said, "He's revealing too much to you, and he's feeling uncomfortable.
Wow.
That's why he's doing like that motion." Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That he's like having a visceral, physical, parasympathetic
he's
thing
saying
that
too much, and he knows he's saying too much, and it's uncomfortable, so he's making that like gagging, like the tongue out. Yeah.
And how did you feel? Were you scared?
The first time?
Yeah.
He when they come down, especially Lawrence Bittaker, he's a little old grandfather. Like, that's what he looks like when he comes down. And you're just kind of like mind blown that this is the most sadistic serial killer sitting in front of you. And then he's not making eye contact and he's so timid. But I know how these guys work and how they operate. They're all unassuming. I mean, this is why they get hitchhikers and people to come party with them like Lawrence Bittaker did. They're so unassuming and they almost seem very timid and dorky. I mean, Kristen said when Norris picked her up, she was like, he looked like a total dweeb. I mean, that's what these guys are. They're still predators, but they may not look it. So even though he was very shy and timid, I never ever let my guard down. These guys are predators and they're ready to pounce at any moment.
And then I just want people to understand that you're doing this because of the victims. It's not only for the study to understand the minds of a serial killer, but that you're trying to get information from them to find missing victims. So let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, and also what I'd love to talk about is when you transitioned from after you knew you had enough of a rapport and trust with him where you could ask him those questions on where these victims were. Give us like a timeline of where it was. The recording that we're going to be releasing today, midway through the show, is pretty much towards the end. So kind of give us a chronology, and then we'll be doing this week after week, going through these recordings and analyzing some of the stuff he said, as well as some of the other serial killers you had. But just for now, tell us that part.
So I met with him for the first time. It was 2014. He gave up the locations of Cindy and Andrea in 2018, so about 4 years afterwards. And those were, even though I had sat down and met with him a few times, he was still very challenging. He didn't want to call. He didn't want to correspond through the mail. He was still kind of giving me this pushback. And it was finally in 2018, there was a switch. I had gotten pregnant. I had always wondered if that could have been one of the underlying causes. I saw an immense change in all of the serial offenders when I became pregnant. And I had always wondered if it was because of their underlying, mother issues. They all have the resentment towards their mother or wanting that mother figure. But yeah, it was right when I had gotten pregnant and when I was in my third trimester, when I was at San Quentin, when he gave up the locations of Cindy Schaefer and Andrea Hall.
What was that like for you when he said that?
Surreal, really surreal. He just grabbed a pen and started drawing the map of where they were and describing exactly how to go and where they would be and exactly why they never found them. The law enforcement was unable to find them in the initial search back in 1980. Norris had led them up into the mountains, but Bittaker was the one who knew the mountains. And Norris had led them to the roads, but just the wrong locations that were never searched. So when he's, explaining all this to me, it was really surreal.
Why was it Norris that led them up there?
Norris struck the deal. Norris struck the deal to not get the death penalty and pretty much become the key witness in testifying against Bittaker. Crime partner versus crime partner. Norris folded first, so Norris led them up there.
But he led them up there and they didn't find anything.
They found Jackie and Leah, but they did not find Cindy and Andrea. The weird thing about this, though, is Norris was not even there when Andrea Hall was killed. So I don't know why Norris would be up there leading them to Andrea Hall's location.
Yeah, well, sounds like he finagled them.
Yeah.
So Norris did lead them to, just let's tell people that because I don't know if people know that when Norris, let's just tell that story. When Norris was arrested, he flipped on Bittaker. And,
yes.
Okay, so tell me that story and then how he led them to Jackie. And
initially what happened was Joseph Jackson went to the police and told the police about Bittaker and Norris, that they were murdering young girls. They had taken the information Joe Jackson had provided and used it to arrest Bittaker and Norris.
And Joe Jackson was in...
He was, yes. So Joe Jackson was a serial rapist himself. He had met Norris in a Tuscadero, and then they were later housed at CMC East. That is where Bittaker and Norris met. Three of them were on D Block, and they were both all released around the same time in 1979 and all moved to Los Angeles County.
And then what happened? How did Joe end up going to the police?
Okay, so Jackson himself was actually trolling with Bittaker and Norris, going to the beaches, taking pictures, Knott's Berry Farm. And then it was just one day in November, he went with his attorney to LAPD. And they didn't think anything of it. They didn't have any missing persons because Bittaker and Norris were very good at covering their tracks. They had no idea they had 2 active serial killers in Los Angeles County. They had called down to the South Bay area, and then it was Paul Bynum, who was the lead detective out of Hermosa, had said, I just had a girl who survived a rape in Hermosa. So he wanted to talk to Jackson, and he put all the pieces together that led to the arrest of Bittaker and Norris.
Okay.
So then Bittaker and Norris get arrested, and then Norris flips on Bittaker.
Yes.
And takes the police up to the mountains. And then what happens?
Yeah. So when they go up to the mountains, this is about a couple months. It was January of 1980. They were arrested in November of 1979. So in January of 1980, they conduct a search on the 2 fire roads. It was a very little search. It was only about a couple police officers were up there with Norris. While they were there, they couldn't find Cindy, so they moved to the other road where Andrea, Jackie, and Leah were. They could not find Andrea, of course, because Norris was not there when she was killed, but they were able to recover some of the partial remains of Jackie Gilliam and Leah Lamp.
What I'd like to do is go back
Right,
to
that's
what
what I'm
we were
saying.
talking about before. So it's like we got that down. We got that disseminated that information.
Yeah.
What I want to go back to is you said it took about 4 years for Bittaker to start opening up about the locations of the bodies.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what was that? And you said that was precipitated probably by the fact that you were in your final trimester of being pregnant with your child.
I think it was partly to do with being pregnant, but I also think it was my persistence. I just kept showing up and kept continuing to reach out. I was persistent. A lot of these offenders, especially the serial offenders, they suffer from immense abandonment issues, trust issues, parental issues, that kind of stuff in nature. So just showing up and being present and persistent with them, I think it does break down the walls, and I think it definitely helped in breaking down Bittaker's, just being persistent and, showing up.
Yeah, the continuity there. Because let's be clear, there's a lot of people who claim to talk to serial killers.
Mm-hmm.
We know a lot of them, and they may have just met them once.
Right.
And they'll go write a book about it, and then they'll just kind of use that as a launch pad to kind of get interest and fame and stuff like that. But you had been doing this for a long time without anybody even knowing about it,
That's right. Nobody even knew. I've been in San Quentin since 2014. 2016, I was there almost like every weekend. I've just been there consistently, and no one knew about my work or what I was doing. This was nothing about fame or anything. My dream as a little girl to be a criminologist, and it's just been my life's calling and mission. But that's something I have to actually work against is a lot of these people just come in and talk to these serial killers and get what they can off them, write a book or whatever, and so these guys have even more trust issues, more abandonment issues. So me showing up for 10 years straight, it definitely plays huge role in why they are so comfortable with me, why they owe to me, why they trust me with the things they're not giving to anybody else.
And also, this is like 7 days a week for you. This isn't like, you just do
Correct.
this one day here, one day there. You're talking to them consistently.
Yeah, and also, I don't know how many times we talk to you, probably maybe once a day, and I don't know how many times we're on the phone with you, and you're like, oh, San Quentin's calling, I gotta go. Charles Ng is calling, I gotta go. Because so it's like, it's a daily thing for you.
Daily thing.
And
I think the last meeting we had, I said, oh, Charles Ng just wrote me at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's nonstop. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And your main goal for doing all of this is?
It had started out with the study and wanting to understand the mindset more to help clinicians, help law enforcement. And it's really just grown from there, because now I've seen, how many of these guys have unknown victims, Jane Does and missing persons out there, and like Cindy and Andrea. So it's kind of morphed more into, helping these families. If I'm able to recover this information from them, I want to use it to help these families.
And the other thing that's interesting, and I'll just tease the public about this and our audience about it, but literally about a month ago, you got pulled in a task force to go talk to one of the top serial killers to try to get information. We're not going to tell you who it is because it's still under wraps, but they bring you in now to talk to these guys to get information. So you're working with them.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, you guys know more about what I can say about that.
Well, we're not going to say who the
don't
person
say
is,
who.
where
Yeah.
it is, but I just want to kind of see how that is evolved into another role for you and another,
Right.
how this has kind of morphed into something, bigger than the study and what you were planning to do, just because almost like you approach this thing as an academic,
Yeah.
as you're getting your schoolwork done. And now it's morphed into like a bigger mission statement of.
It's definitely getting bigger. I mean, being called into a task force is pretty huge, and especially from the sheriff's department. And there is another case just recently, the DA has contacted me, and both cases are about, finding the unknown information, because I'm able to draw it out of these guys.
It's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit more about the psychology of how you approach them in the conversation. We have seen it in the flesh. We've seen what you do. Mm-hmm. And so it's so hard, and I've explained it in a way, it's kind of like, it's a casual conversation that about really crazy stuff. And how you kind of talk to them. I just got done listening to the thing that we're going to listen to a little bit, and it's very interesting how you basically enable them to open up by just asking them basic open-ended questions, like simple stuff.
Yeah.
How are you today?
Right.
How are you feeling? Did you go to the doctor? That kind of thing.
A lot of times I'm interviewing and people will totally miss it. I'm taking my son camping. Where did you go camping at? Tell me about what place. Oh, what woods did you go to? What's to check out there? Anything cool? It seems like it's a casual conversation, but it's actually not. I'm actually trying to find out what areas they're familiar with, especially if I know they have bodies in the wilderness. A lot of times it seems like it's a casual conversation, and they think it is, but I'm actually digging for information in a very casual way too.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're so comfortable with you at that point, they're not even realizing what they're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, like Douglas Clark was a perfect example. I mean, he's just recently passed on, but we saw him in action, and
Yes.
when he gets wound up, he just spills it.
He goes. Yeah. That's another thing too, is you want to agree a lot too. So you'll always hear me say, right. And they could be talking about like some of the most heinous things. It's not that I'm saying right. It's just because psychologically, when you're agreeing with someone, they're going to keep going. They're going to go further. So, there's a lot of psychological tricks that do go into this to help further along, keep them talking, such like that.
No, it's pretty amazing. And when did you realize in your work, at what point did you realize, all right, this is a technique I got to foster? When you realize, and you had an aha moment, said, oh, wow, if I approach it this way, they'll start telling me things that they're not going to tell anybody else.
Yeah. I think I did have an aha moment with Whitaker one time, and it was about infusing humor into the interviews. And we had been talking, and he had said something that reminded me of that TV show, Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And I had explained to him the episode, and I was laughing out loud, thinking about the scene I was describing to him in the TV show. And he had thought I was actually laughing about the crimes. But he had felt so easy. He had felt like so comfortable in that moment of just me laughing, that he goes, do you want to hear something nobody knows about this case? And I looked at him, and I really did laugh. And I said, that's kind of why I'm here. That's when he actually proceeded to tell me that he actually did commit a sexual assault on Leah Lamp, which has been unknown in the case.
Wow. Why was he holding on to that piece of information?
I don't know why he held off on that one.
And why do you think most of these guys hold that information inside once they, if they're starting to tell you about how they killed someone? Is there like some sort of hierarchy of guilt that they don't want to release some things that maybe they think is more heinous than others?
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. I think a lot of them don't want to face themselves, those demons, face themselves in the mirror. Sometimes it's very hard for them. When I'm sitting down with them, I'm pretty much holding up a mirror and making them face demons they've never wanted to face, that they're trying to bury. So it is hard for them. Another reason why they can hold back, especially on body locations, is, this is their last playing card. They're on death row. They have nothing left except for this last one playing card. And they want to hold, especially anger excitation status. They want that power. They want to hold on to that power till the very end.
Yeah.
Oh, we know that. We've experienced that. Gary Ridgway did that with us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was horrible. And the real thing that always just gets me is when you're talking to them about these victims and they pretend to show remorse, but there is no remorse. There really isn't. and the ones we've dealt with, it's always a ploy, a manipulation to kind of make you feel like they're not who they are. Did you ever get that impression from Bittaker? What did you think about that?
Bittaker was actually he was a unique one, I would say, because he was pretty upfront about no remorse, not having remorse at all. Even on the show, he had said to me, do you know what it feels like to put an ice pick into somebody's skull and not feel anything? He was very upfront about not having those emotions and not feeling anything for the victim or having remorse. But then he did shift at the very end when it started to hit him.
Yeah.
That he was going to die.
Yes.
So there's that moment where it flips and he realizes that he's going to hell or whatever.
Right.
He's not sure what the unknown is. So now he quickly wants to flip and have some remorse. Do you think that when he was telling you this stuff, I can't even imagine how you feel when you have to compartmentalize this. I mean, I want people to understand how we have to compartmentalize these things, because it's you're feeling all the stuff for the victim and the rage that you have that this person could just take a life so casually and have pleasure in taking that life. And it's enraging.
It is. It is.
And then you have to compartmentalize that rage because you're trying to get information out of this person to find where the missing victims are. It's very, very difficult to balance those two. I had a very hard time with Gary Ridgway.
Incredibly difficult.
Rob had to deal with him because I would read the audio transcripts and I would just get enraged and couldn't compartmentalize. It was very difficult for me.
Yeah. The craziest part is when he did like 6 months, Gary Ridgway, where they interrogated him every day for 8 hours. The police did. He disclosed everything he did. And it was part of his deal. And then his brother basically negotiated that deal and motivated him to do that. But the interesting thing is that, he would pick up these prostitutes on the streetwalkers, and then he would take them someplace and he would pay them for sex, and he would have sex with them, and then he would obviously kill them right in the moment of his climax, and then he would just leave him there. And then he was saying to the police officers, they were saying, well, were you raped and you killed him? And he's like, I didn't rape them because I paid for sex for them. I didn't rape them. And they're like, looking at that, I can hear. I'm watching the videotape of the interrogation.
Psychotic.
I go, he was convinced. He goes, I didn't rape anybody.
Was Bittaker like that too, where did he acknowledge what he did, or was he like Ridgway, where he would just say that I didn't do that?
No, he fully acknowledged that he raped the girls. I have encountered that, though, where they do get touchy about the rape. The biggest one I get, this is actually a perfect example, is Gary Ridgway. The necrophilia is the one where they always freeze up. Yeah. Yeah, there's different levels. Well,
we even heard that one gentleman we interviewed inside prison, the one who testified. What was his name again? We had him on the podcast. I can't remember his name right now.
The one that testified?
Anthony.
Anthony, yeah. Canheo. Anthony Canheo. Yeah. And he was like, even that was like a line in the sand for him.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not seen very highly amongst thieves or killers or rapists. They don't like the rapists.
They don't. If you've committed an act in prison of, hurting a woman or a child, they do target you. The reason, someone like Bittaker and Douglas Clark were safe is because they were on death row, because death row is isolated from the main population.
Yep. All right. Well, listen, why don't we do this just to set up this audio recording? It's an interview. This is the one where he kind of broke down with you. Can you kind of set this up? When you talk to him, it's about 9.5 minutes long. We'll play the clip and then we'll come back on and then we'll talk about it. But can you set this clip up for us?
So this was the night before. Bittaker had 2 heart attacks, and this was the morning. I had just woken up and he was frantically calling me, and I jump on and he's really emotional, as you can tell from what you're going to hear from the clip. And he knows he has cancer at this point. It's getting weak at this point. He knows he doesn't have much time left, and now he's just had these 2 heart attacks, and he knows the end is near, and he pretty much has just a total breakdown.
We're going to play that now. Hold on one sec.
And when he called you, Laura, how did you feel? Like, what were you thinking? Were you like frantic to get the information from him?
Yeah, exactly. Pure panic, because I'm like, I'm running out of time and he could go any second.
Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Hey.
Here you go. How are you?
How are you feeling?
Vulnerable.
That's good, though.
Mortal. Kind of heart attacks will do that, I guess.
Yeah, seriously.
All I wanted to do was for the pain to stop, but I knew that even calling for help here was going to get it stopped for a while. So
I
why
still
bother?
think you should go get seen.
what can they do? You know, they
Let the
can't give me a
doctor. You're not a doctor.
bypass
Let the
like
let the doctors at
it's a
least look at
weekend.
you.
I can't even see a doctor. No, they don't. They don't have one over there in the hospital. Unless it's an emergency. They would send me out. I wouldn't even see one before I left.
Yeah, let them send you out. It's serious.
Well, they wouldn't send me out because it's not an emergency. I'm not having a heart attack at the moment.
But if you had one, you have to be seen.
Yeah, eventually. Hey, girl, you don't understand the way things run around here. I was here 10 years before they decided I had high blood pressure and needed some medication. But in the meantime, my kidneys were half killed. So, you know, that's the way it goes. Anyway, any questions?
How long, when you put me down as your next of kin, how long does that take to, I don't know, go through?
I'll have it done in a couple of days. Just a matter of filling out some forms I got.
Okay.
I'm probably not going to die tomorrow, but other than that, because it's been, 17 years since the last heart attack, and I had 2 in one night.
Just make sure you put the house phone on there so they call me if anything happens.
Yeah, I'll put yours and the moms and dads on there in case it can't get to you.
Yeah.
Might be on surveillance somewhere. The weird thing was, I thought it was a strained muscle in my chest or something, you know. So I kept moving around, trying to see if I could relax it. And I finally realized, you know, that's not a muscle spasm. It's another heart attack.
Yeah.
So I started sucking on nitros and hoping the pain would go away. It got so bad, I was, you know, hey, I gotta, you know, it races wake everybody in the unit when they call an emergency man down, and they start, you know, running the alarm and sending everybody down here to rescue me. I don't want to do that. Keep hoping here and hope that the pain goes away.
Are you still in pain right now?
No. If it was, I wouldn't be able to handle that this long.
Yeah.
Finally, it started to go away, and I figure, okay, I made it through.
That's really scary.
After a little while, it started up again. I said, oh no, not another one.
Oh my God.
And it took about 3 hours before everything settled down.
You should get seen. You sound like you're winded, like you've been running or something.
No, it's just the reaction, the sort of empathy with what I went through. That wasn't nice. It wasn't fun, you know. Kind of a taste of maybe what my victims are going through. What have I done? What have I done? I'm sorry. Sometimes reality comes back.
Is there anything you would say to them, your victims, if they were here?
Oh, God. What could I say? What could make up for it? It's like when they ask you what would I like to say to the families. My God, what could I say? What could I say that would be anything, mean anything to them?
Let me know if this is too much. I don't want to push you with everything.
Oh, it doesn't make any difference what I feel now. What can I do to help anybody? I have to do this in order to help somebody somewhere.
It is going to help people.
Yeah.
It is.
All I can do is hope.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Sarah, you don't even know. This can be used for research. Cindy and Andrea are still missing up there. I mean, so much good can still come from this.
Well, it seems to me it's a mixed blessing, and they have to go through all this again, even though it has some good come from it. I don't know what to do. All I can do is listen to you and some other people and do what their judgment seems to be reasonable. I can't trust mine anymore. I have to rely on somebody else to kind of guide me.
Well, I have your back. I'm not guiding you to anything bad, trust me. This is...
Oh, I'm relying on you. I trust you.
Good.
I've been trying to help out in the past, and the authorities just kind of ignored me. And I don't know why. I don't understand that.
I'm not ignoring you.
Oh, I know you aren't. I'm just saying, commenting on that. I've tried to contact folks, and I've got some communications, I think, with LAPD, or I'm going to dig it out of my files to see if there's any names or anything that would help you.
Yeah, anything. Do you want to talk about, is there anything about the sexual fantasy that you had that ties into all this?
Okay, I gotta give up the phone now. I'll call you again whenever I get a chance.
All right, yeah, call me whenever. And
take care. Thank you all for helping. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I always get chills when I hear that. I've heard it like twice today already.
Yeah. It's interesting when you brought up the sexual fantasy, he cut you off immediately.
Well, you know what? It's funny. I was so taken back by his outbursts and like his emotion that came through. And I was actually fumbling and just trying to think of anything to go back at him and say. And you can hear it in my voice. I'm like, let's go back to, I just asked like a basic question because I was really frazzled. I was not expecting that outburst of emotion from him.
Why do you think that happened?
I think it was the 2 heart attacks. And he had called, weeks prior saying, I have cancer everywhere. It was spreading in like every type of internal organ you can imagine. It just literally spreading through his whole body. So he knew he was dying, and then the 2 heart attacks. I think it really just hit him. It clicked. This is the end. And he has to face now what he's done. And it just all spilled out, and you hear it in his phone call. I still get chills. I haven't heard that phone call in a while, and I had chills, listening to it back. It's very emotional.
When you say you were shocked by his emotion, he had never shown that kind of emotion to you before.
No, nothing like that. No, I had seen him cry, but never like just an outburst of emotion like that. And when I had said, what would you say to the victims' families? And when he gave the answer of what could I say? What could I say that would mean anything to them? That's what really sent chills down my spine, because it was such a human emotion. It was a human response of like, what could I say? What can I say? What could I say that would mean anything to them? He had taken their loved ones, their family from them. And he was saying, what could I say that would mean anything? And it was just such a real, authentic answer. When he said that, it really gave me chills. And I was like, oh my God, he really is. It's really hitting him in this moment of what he has done.
Do you think that's the first time he ever had that recollection?
Yeah, oh yeah. Because before that, like I said, there was nothing. When he talked about the crime or the victims, and he acknowledged he didn't have feelings when he even drove the ice pick in. So to go from that to this tape of him dying and him saying that response, it was like whiplash. I was like, oh my God, it's really hitting him now.
How long after this did he give you the map?
Well, we had started mailing the maps back and forth right after he had gave it in 2018. But because, we're talking mountain terrain maps, we had to do so many different types of maps. We did like satellite maps, topographical maps. So we had mailed literally about 100 maps back and forth to each other, but we were still trying to find the exact pinpoints. And I flew out to San Quentin right after that phone call with just maps in hand, because I knew it was the end and we had to get these pinpoints at least down.
And then when you got there, what happened?
I spent 3 weeks right before he died with him. He had collapsed a few times in the cage with me. He was a skeleton. He was pale as hell, literally just collapsing on the floor while I was there. I didn't think he was going to even make it to 3 weeks. But in that time, we were able to get the exact pinpoints down on the maps.
So was it that outburst of emotion was almost like an act of contrition for him? Did he believe in God?
No, Not really. I think he told me he was agnostic. He wasn't really religious. I had asked him if he went to church as a child. He had said no. There was actually, who is it? There's a guy from San Quentin that has been helping me with my research and getting the serial killers on board. And he's actually, I want to have him on the podcast, but he was actually in the cell above Larry during this whole time. And he saw this phone call because they played a clip of it on the Toolbox Killer, and he had heard the clip and he had remembered hearing this phone call actually in person. And he had called me afterwards and said, he goes, I remember this phone call in person. And he had cried about an hour after you guys had hung up that phone, like sitting in his cell whimpering and crying about it.
Yeah. Well,
so pointless.
It is pointless.
It's just so makes you so angry. Why did he do it in the first place?
Well, no, I think to me, at this point, it's kind of disgusting what kind of ego he has at this point to go to that lengths of emotion at this point. When he has a couple breaths of air left, a little bit of a time, and now he's sorry. It's a very moving and explosive recording, but it's like, let's be clear, audience. This we're not playing this to have any sympathy for Lawrence Bittaker. This is to show how Laura is doing this work and getting information from these manipulative psychopaths.
It is important, I think, if there is like any serial offenders who do listen to this, because so many of them go to their graves with their bodies, with their unknown victims and stuff, and it's just so heartless and cruel to the families. I think Bittaker should be an example of doing the right thing, even if it's at the very end, for these families. Don't cause them any more pain or suffering. If you have this information, it needs to be given up. And it's, why bring it to death? Why bring it, you're going to die anyway. At least give these families some solace, before you pass away.
I agree. But let's be clear. He would have never gotten there without you.
Right.
I mean, if you had never reached out to him, he would have probably told a couple cellmates, and all that information would have just died within San Quentin's walls.
He would have never told law enforcement that. I don't believe he would.
No, none of them would have. But they kind of look at, when they're viewing law enforcement, they see the enemy because they worked with the DA to put them behind bars. So they don't like to give up this type of information to them. Even a criminologist like myself is kind of like, right teetering on the line. Anybody in forensic psychology is still like, they don't know if they can trust you, but they perceive, private investigators and forensic psychologists, criminologists a little better because they understand we're coming in to really do the research and figure out why this is occurring and happening. So they're a little bit more receptive in that aspect.
So through all your research with Bittaker, why do you think that he did the things that he did?
There's never just one X factor with these guys. It really is a perfect storm that all comes together. There's a genetic predisposition with most of them. Sometimes, there's something neurologically, like frontal lobe damage. I think a lot of it, though, also that contributes is nurture, the sociology aspect of how they were raised, their environment. It all comes together to make a perfect storm, to make a serial killer.
Which brings me to the next question. He named you next of kin.
Yes, that was what I wanted to talk to you about. Tell us a little bit about that, because that is fascinating.
Yeah, so pretty much it's not like, I guess, a normal sense of next of kin. The reason he was doing this was so I wouldn't run into red tape, after he died. I could continue on with the case, getting the materials that I needed, and finding the girls. So by naming me next of kin, it opened some doors for me to, continue on with the case and getting files that I otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Let's explain that a little bit, the discovery that happens. Yeah. All of their files, when they're put on death row, are sealed away and no one can really access them.
Yes. So the police files, they're sealed from everybody. Even private investigators cannot obtain them. The only way to obtain them is through the offender, because they are, by law, required a copy, so they work on their own defense. And that is how I acquired Lawrence Bittaker's.
And so the only other people that had it was his defense attorney.
Correct.
And obviously the prosecution.
Yeah. Prosecution, law enforcement, his attorneys, and myself.
And so after you got the information about where Cindy and Andrea were located, then what happened?
That was right as I, got the pinpoint locations, COVID hit, because I was set to come out to Los Angeles and get up to San Gabriel Mountains. And of course, the world shuts down and I can't get out there. But then it was 2021. I was able to finally get out there, and I went out with Andrea Hall's sister. We went up to the mountains. We got a metal detector and we did a whole sweep of the road. And it's about a mile long. There was no hits. Nothing is picking up. And then I go to the spot that Bittaker had pinpointed, and it starts going off like crazy. The only spot right there on the road.
Well, we're going back and we're going to bring a team back with us. So we're just going to have to put a pin in it for now until we get all our people in place and the right forensic people and crime scene investigators. But we are currently putting together a team to do that to see if we can find her. But
yeah, I should also explain the reason a metal detector is so important for finding these girls was because the ice pick was actually embedded into the bone and left inside of them.
Horrifying.
It is horrifying. It's horrifying, and we wanted to play that tape because we have more from him as well, and we're kind of spoon feeding it out. But I think it's really important to hear how you work with these killers and how you're able to get information from them. And I think that was a complete illustration of your technique, and it even caught you off guard. You've been doing this, you've been doing that whole time, and you had no idea he was going to uncork that piece of information and that emotion and that act of contrition for what he did.
Never saw that coming. I was very shocked.
And from a psychological standpoint, it's a huge breakthrough for like understanding these killers.
Yeah.
That someone that far gone down the food chain of humanity can still have something of an emotion. You know, it's taken, but that's a testament of your work. Because like I said before, that's not happening if you never met him.
And even the head psychiatrist at San Quentin noted it in his final psych eval, an improvement, and had mentioned me, not by name, but in the final psych eval about this improvement in his traits, his antisocial traits, which I couldn't believe. So obviously there was other clinicians at San Quentin that also noticed a major change in him. On the show, they said cured. That was not what was stated in the psych eval.
Cured? Who said cured? Oh, in the TV show?
In the TV show, they put cured, which is not true. You cannot cure antisocial personality traits. There is no method to cure it. Was misrepresented. I just want to state that the clinicians at San Quentin put there's an improvement, and that happens. This is a common factor with age. We do notice a decrease in traits, but they had noticed, especially within Lawrence Bittaker, in those final months, there was an improvement in his antisocial personality traits.
And you said something interesting before, that a lot of it comes down with him to nurture, and that his childhood damaged him. He was not nurtured as a child, and that can damage. Maybe some people can handle it better than others. So as a society, what can we do to prevent this from happening? We have to do something.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at what's happening in our society with the school shootings, it's just the violence in America, especially. Something needs to be done.
Well, it comes down to family.
Yeah, it does.
It really does. It's the family unit, and two strong parents who are loving and caring and nurturing. And I'm sure there's people that come out of, they can have a loving and nurturing family and still come out to be a serial killer. That stuff happens, but the likelihood is less if you come from that kind of environment, a loving, caring, nurturing family with two strong parental role models.
And maybe if people it takes a village to raise kids, okay?
It does.
It really takes a village. So if you're seeing signs of someone behaving in ways that are not normal, antisocial behavior, you can see it. Say something. Why doesn't anyone do anything?
Well, now more than ever, it's easier to track because most of these young people are putting it all out on social media, and it's like you hear about these awful spree shootings and these mall shootings and these school shootings, and as soon as they scrub their social media, they have tons of stuff saying this is the chronology of how they're going to do it. Yeah. So it's like that's what we have to pay attention to because they're
we
giving.
Do. And I have Lawrence Bittaker's reports from when he was 16 from a social worker when he was first in youth authority. And they were saying that they were seeing signs of, rage and were worried about him becoming extremely violent as an adult. So there were warning signs from his teenage years that this could have occurred.
And they didn't do anything about it.
We're talking
back then we're talking
60s.
the 40s. Yeah, no, 40s.
40s, okay.
There wasn't. They didn't know enough about what's occurring, but now we do. And it's so important, whether it's a social worker, a teacher, or just anybody around a child who's noticing this type of behavior to do something about it.
I think it's like I said before, that recording always brought chills down my spine, but it also showed a lot of grace under fire that you showed trying to handle that. And still, after he had that emotional outburst, you were on point and you went in for more information. And I don't know whether or not he was getting off the phone because he wanted to get off the phone or he had to get off the phone.
It felt to me like you pushed a button. When you said that, what did you say? Sexual assault? What word did
No,
you use?
they did take the phone. I did find that out from another
I think
inmate.
so too. I think he probably would have
They
told
did
you all
come
that.
and take because they have like the wheel around phones at San Quentin. So they'll come and take it. And it was a late phone call because he had been trying me all morning and I had been sleeping and just kind of woken up to that. Final last try, he was trying to get me on before they took the phone away from him. But yeah, it was so unexpected when I answered, and that just outburst of emotion, and to have it captured. And when you can hear it when he starts going in about, realizing what he's done. That's why I pushed and said, what would you say to the victims? If they were here, what would you say to their families? I wanted to dive in and see if this is really true, if this is really hitting home the actions of what he has done.
Yeah.
How many lives he has impacted and destroyed. I wanted to see, his reaction, and if this was a true reaction from him.
Yeah, there was an emotional spike after you asked him that.
Yeah.
Anyway, fantastic work, Laura.
Yeah.
Fantastic
Thank
work.
you.
I mean, so we'll keep on this train, and we're going to keep on going. And like I said before, we're going to put together our team. We're going to go out there and we're going to find them. And hopefully some of these other serial killers will learn from this and understand, hey, listen, what do you have left to do other than just creating some closure and solace? So if it's the last thing you do in your breath. And I think that's one of the reasons why they want to talk to you now.
Yeah. And, especially right now at San Quentin, when they're about to be all moved into general population.
They're going to die. They're going to get killed. Yeah. A lot of them are going to get killed. And I think
they know. So right now, what's happening, what you hear with Bittaker in that phone call is happening right now with like 15 of them all at once right now at San Quentin.
How are you keeping your wits about you? That's the thing.
I don't even know. It's been crazy this last 6 months, having to deal with what you just heard with Bittaker, with all of them at once. It's been a ride. It's been incredible. It's, having to face the end with all of them at once.
Unfortunately, it's a karmic bomb that they have to swallow.
Yes.
There's no closure because you can never bring these victims back. But if they could at least give the respect to those victims to allow their families to bury them properly.
To bury them, right.
Well, Bittaker said it the best. He goes, if I can do one good thing, one good thing. So that's his last olive branch he can offer.
Right. They deserve to give it to the families.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
They really do.
And you're going to keep on fighting with their families, and we're going to keep on fighting for those families and all these victims out there. And anyway, fantastic work.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
Next time on Partners in True Crime.
On this season of Partners in True Crime, The Serial Killer Whisperer, we will be following Laura Brand's incredible journey as she continues her groundbreaking study on serial killers.
Each week, we will release never-before-heard recordings of her conversations with the most notorious killers in hopes to get answers for the victims' families, and maybe that could lead to recovering their lost remains.
Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and check out extra content from all of our podcasts. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content.